purpose of this hour is to talk about the brain, is to talk about how we can help the brain in understanding the central nervous system. The premise of this is if you cannot measure something, you can't manage it. If you can't measure your bank account, how would you manage writing checks? If you can't measure how much food you have in your house, how would you know when you go to the grocery store what you need to buy, right? If you just went off to the grocery store but you didn't check your refrigerator, you didn't check your pantry, you didn't check your basement freezer to see how much meat you have in there or whatever you have in there, how would you actually proactively go and buy your groceries? You'd be going by the seat of your pants, which is not really a good idea, right? So when we're looking at our children, when we're looking, because they have a brain, right, and because we want to support their brain function, we want them to succeed in their abilities, right? We want them, no matter what we do with them, we want them to homeschool them, and we want them to be well developed neurologically. We want them to be socially excellent. We want them to be physically as coordinated as possible. We want them to learn as developmentally easily as possible, right? Reading, writing, arithmetic. The premise is that if you measure their brain, then you can enhance their neurology so that when you lay down the software program, which is the writing programs and the reading programs and the math programs and all these beautiful programs out here in this center, in this hall, are software programs. Some parents buy the software programs because they're very cool. Like, wow, we really need to teach the Bible in this specific way. Or it would be really excellent to teach math in this way. I was taught in this way and it was really drudgery, but if I teach math in this way, my child will love it and they'll be enthusiastic and so on and so forth. But some parents buy the software programs out here because the kid's not succeeding at home. They're not winning in the writing, they're not winning in the reading, they're not winning in their math, and you have a couple kids that are doing really, really well, but this one is struggling. You go, why is he struggling? What's up with that? Oh, he doesn't focus, he doesn't pay attention, his pants are on fire, he can't sit still, he's fidgeting all the time, he's touching everything. He learns it today, the next day he forgets it. Where did it go? He's more exasperated by it than you are, by the way, because he'd like to please you, and what he sees on your face is disappointment. His reference point for how he's doing today is you. And if your face is exasperation, maybe sometimes a little annoyed that he didn't remember it today because you really did a good job yesterday. You ever feel like you did a great job and he didn't get it? Like, And how's your face look? Your kid says, I'm not doing so good because mommy's not happy, right? So sometimes you'll go in there and you'll buy a better math program or a better reading program or a better whatever it is, hoping that if we just do this, the kid will get it. And you'll spend loads and loads. Anybody ever do that in this room? Go in and buy a program hoping that it will tag your child's neurological situation, right? Did it work? Probably not. It never does. Because if, let's say, I have this beautiful computer over here, it happens to be a Macintosh, could have been a Dell, could have been a Toshiba, could have been an IBM, doesn't matter. But let's say it did not run Microsoft really well, it didn't run my PowerPoint very well, it didn't run my Adobe flash drive very well. Let's say I had all these applications and they weren't running very well. Do I go to the software programmer and say, could you change my software? Or do I go to the hard drive and I figure out it doesn't have enough RAM, it doesn't have enough memory, I can't put too many things on the desktop because it collapses. Years ago, I had a Mac that if I opened up one application, I couldn't open up another one. I had to close that, open up another one. Anybody remember that? I'm 56, by the way. I'm pretty old. And you would go and you would open up maybe 2 applications. Now I can have my desktop open and be running 5 applications and my computer does not slow down at all. Is that your kid's brain? Or does your child have a brain that you run one program and everybody has to leave the room? Everybody be quiet. And you spend your whole day. Anybody in this room ever feel like your pants are on fire and you're running around all day solving problems? You're putting out fires all day? And you wish you could be 5 minutes ahead of the problem as opposed to 5 minutes behind the problem. Anybody here feel like you're 5 minutes ahead of every issue, you know exactly what's coming up, and you deal with it gracefully? Everybody in this room? Anybody? Anybody feel like they're kind of 5 minutes behind the issue and you're scrambling to sort out the kids' abilities, right? Yeah, okay. How about we just shift that 10 minutes. Wouldn't it be great to shift 10 minutes? The only way you're going to shift it is to know what his brain is doing, why it's doing it. Don't take it personally. Go and solve the areas of his brain that were genetically wired to do these functionalities that God laid down, you didn't. And then say, okay, he's doing this because this is his neurology at this point. Can I enhance his neurology? Absolutely. Does he have to stay still? No. If he's blind, deaf, paralyzed, insensate, epileptic, or you have an uncle that's got Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or your child had a stroke or is within a coma, we can help you heal your child's brain. Can we do it together? Absolutely. Could you do it by yourself? Maybe. Our premise is that we've been doing this for more than 34 years, and if we work with you, we have the ability to work together as a team. We have the ability to teach you because it's important that you are informed rather than not informed. It's important that you do things on purpose rather than by accident, right? Anybody, like, you don't want to scramble, right? It's too important to scramble with your well kids, with your hurt kids. You love them. You adore them. You wake up every morning. How many times do you think about your kids all day, right? 47,000 times, yeah? You want them to win, right? They're not winning not because they're being mean to you. They're not winning because they want to be lazy. They're not winning because they are disobedient. They're not winning because it's 99.9% of the time they're disorganized. There's distortion in the central nervous system, and they can't produce a result the way you think they should. And so there's discord between the mommy and the kid, or the daddy and the kid. Let's see this. Let's see this as a brain function as opposed to a personality disorder. Okay? So this is the Family Hope Center. We incorporated in 2001. But all of our team members, if you lined up our 8 doctors and you lined up our therapists and you put bookended all the years that we've been working with hurt kids and well kids, because you can't really understand hurt kids unless you work with well kids. How would you understand a disease unless you understood wellness? How would you understand a pathological situation unless you understood the physiological abilities, right? How would you know that? So if you bookended us all, it would be more than 300 years of experience bookended together that we bring on one kid. Your kid. Your kid gets 300 years of experience, and we put that together to design a neurological program, but we teach you and we work together so that you could be the therapist, that you're our left arm. Right? If I was your GPS, I love the GPS in my car. I love GPS because I get lost sometimes, right? Anybody here get lost? Like you're supposed to turn left, you turn right, you know? Your GPS is like your best friend, right? If I flew out from Philadelphia yesterday, arrived late last night, and I was happy I had a GPS on my phone that I could get from LAX to here. If I didn't and I had to scramble, it would have been complicated. But with my GPS, I can breathe. With a map of your kid's brain, when you get up every morning, you can breathe. You can go, okay, I know where he is neurologically. I know where he needs to get to. I need to put this in play right now. And over time, I can get to this point. But if you don't know where he is, how would you know where he's going? If you don't know his neurology, then you would take it personally. Or you would be frustrated to the point of maybe giving up or handing it over to somebody else. It's not complicated. So this is our office. We see families from more than 34 different countries. This is part of our team. This is where we teach in more than 9 languages. Next week we have a seminar in Philadelphia, 12 countries and 17 states represented. We're going to teach parents. Parents aren't going to be alone. We're not going to talk so high above you that you're not going to know the information, but we need to support your abilities as a mother so that you can help your kids. Thomas Jefferson said to William Jarvis, he said, I know of no safe depository of the powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise control with wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. I know of no safe place but the family and the mommies and daddies themselves. And if we think the mommies and daddies are not wise enough to support their children along the way, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. You're here because you want to be informed, because it's better to be informed than not informed. It's better to have options and no options, right? Whether this option works for you or not, at least you have an option. You're here because you love your kid, not the other way around. You're not here because you have to be. You're here because your kid matters. So you're going to inform your discretion by education, and then you're going to use that knowledge to help your kids. Isn't that right? That's what defines you. It doesn't define the third grade teacher because they're not learning sometimes the next level thing. They're learning what they have to learn to get through their day. Do you ever experience that? But you are always looking to inform your discretion by education and putting your wisdom into play on behalf of your kid. That's what we do. We could have been 15 therapists dealing with a whole bunch of kids, but we decided to become teachers, engineers, teach you how to engineer your child's brain. Therefore, we can see hundreds. We've seen more than 18,000. That's a lot of kids, right? And I've been doing this for more than 34 years. I have a Rolodex of over 18,000 kids in my head. Good for you. Good for your kid. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what we can put in play tomorrow on behalf of your kid, right? If you had a person who worked on 18,000 cars, they should be pretty good on cars, right? No matter what car you bring them, they got it. They understand how your car needs to work even more than it was last Tuesday. So the Family Hope Center is an organization of doctors and therapists and engineers that we're working to support you. So we deal with more than 30 countries, more than 30 years of experience back to back. We want to teach you how the brain works and teach you neurodevelopment so that you could support your family, okay? We work with all of this, which is irrelevant in terms of the labels, because labels are just ways to identify a collection of symptoms, but it's within the central nervous system, so the labels become irrelevant. Down syndrome, dyslexia, epilepsy, ADD, Parkinson's. You know, Alzheimer's is an epidemic in the United States. They don't talk about it, but it's simply an injury in the amygdala. The amygdala runs into the hippocampus for short-term memory. The sensory pathway that runs to the amygdala is your sense of smell. You have 240 receptors in your smell pathway. You only have 40 in the auditory and only 4 in your visual pathway. You can smell up to 1 trillion smells. Well, if you know that Alzheimer's patients have short-term memory, and CAT scans and functional MRIs tell you that the amygdala is damaged, can you grow the amygdala? Can you support that organ? Yes, you can. You got to give a kid a smell program. You got to give your grandfather a smell program. If you give them 5 smells a day for 5 days, and you give them more than 150 smells over 6 weeks, you give them coconut oil 4 tablespoons a day, you give them the galactose 2 tablespoons a day, and you do some craniosacral, you're going to turn that Alzheimer's patient into somebody who can remember. It'll take about 5 weeks. That's pretty cool. I just taught you something. Anybody here have an uncle or an aunt or a mother that's bordering on Alzheimer's dementia? That's what you want to do tomorrow. Okay? We've seen it happen again and again. We could be a clinic that only deals with Alzheimer's, but we don't. We deal with all the neurology of anybody, whether the child is born tomorrow in Pennsylvania, blind, deaf, and paralyzed, or they're just 1 year behind their peers. They're doing really, really well, but they just can't get the math thing. They just can't read it. Or writing is upside down. They're reversing letters and flipping them upside down. If you're that close, you feel like you're that far away. If you're a kid who's 17 and you're graduating from high school and you are scrambling to deal with your schoolwork, college is going to be really complicated for you. But if we could unpack your neurology and not give you the impression that you're stupid because you're a bright kid who's disorganized, different. You heal the disorganization which is in the hard drive, and the software programs come into play. So these things are really irrelevant for us. These are my kids. I'm going to just tell you about these two. This one was born well, and in about 6 weeks or so, she got a DPT shot and became brain injured. She became hemiplegic. And her eye went in, and her right side, she lost function of her right side, and she got pretty hurt. She screamed for 48 hours, and at the end, her brain just kind of separated. Okay? Not nice. Not nice for her, not nice for me. So let me ask you a question. From those of you who have a child who's in this room who's not doing perfect, right? When's the last time you got a good night's sleep? From the moment you realized your kid wasn't making it, when's the last time you got a good night's sleep? Isn't it difficult to close both eyes when the kid down the hallway can't read? Or the kid down the hallway has seizures to balance himself, that he can't understand a four-step, he can't understand a two-step request. You write it down, you strap it to him, you tell him to read it, he goes upstairs, he loses the sign. You're like, oh, I wrote it on your hand. I forgot to look at my hand. Yeah, does that ever happen? Yeah. The kid's more sad than you are that he couldn't do a two-step request because he just gets up in a day wanting you to be proud. But he can't because he doesn't have the brain to be proud, but you can help that. So my wife is a reading specialist. She's taught more than 10,000 parents how to teach their kids to read. She's really, really good at it. She's a homeschool, but she's also a neurologist who's taught mothers. But this one had a very, very, very difficult time. When she was 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, she still couldn't read a sentence and understand what it was. But we worked with her neurology. She couldn't follow a three-step request because she couldn't remember it, and she had apraxia, so she couldn't remember words that were associated with actions. But we didn't make it her problem. We made the problem the problem. She's not my problem. The problem's the problem. The solution's not my problem either. The solution's the solution to my problem. Getting up every day and doing a neurologically engineering program made me a more effective father. Okay? Now, I was already in the field of neurology, but it didn't make it a whole lot easier. It just made it that I understood the pathway, and I didn't beat myself up for it. It took her till about she was 10 before she understood how to read a sentence and comprehend it, even though we were working on it. From the day she got hurt, we were working on her. She became a national gymnast. She became a concert violinist. She graduated with her doctorate in occupational therapy and works in San Francisco at Stanford's Hospital. Pretty good for her. She remembers. She remembers everything. And it was not a nice moment to be in a Sunday school where you couldn't read anything and it was going to be your turn. Anybody ever be in that situation when you couldn't read and you're going around a room and you're like, oh, praying, please don't pick me, please don't pick me. I don't want to look like I don't know anything. Yeah, that's a terrible place. But good news for her. She's better. She's good. This one we adopted at 5 months. You can tell she's not part of our genetic code. She adopted she cried all the time. She cried all the time. She was hurting in the limbic part of the brain. And she stole everything. She lied about everything. She was spectacularly disobedient. Like, why did you do that? I don't know. Anybody ever have a kid, you say, why did you do that? And they say, I don't know. And you know what? They don't. The front part of the brain, the frontal lobe, is not connected. They don't get it. And so in order for me not to make it her problem and have her read, 100 Bible verses and memorize them, thou shalt obey your mother. That doesn't work, by the way. It might work for your well kid, but if you're a her kid, you ever try that with your her kid? It doesn't work. The next day, they break the same commandment that they broke yesterday, but they didn't even remember, right? She's now a basketball player at Philadelphia University. She's a firefighter. She's 20 years old. She's going to become a nurse practitioner. She's 6 foot. She's built like a brick house. She is a wonderful kid who is a team captain. When you work on a neurology, all the distortions begin to disappear and the person emerges that God gave them to be, but the distortion prevents them from being what they need to be because of a brain injury. We were her third set of parents. She didn't have the bonding reflex. A whole bunch of issues in her brainstem never got sorted out. So when we adopted her, we inherited a neurological situation that was upside down. But because we could measure it, we could target the parts of her brain and not, exasperate her and exasperate ourselves. We could parent her more effectively. This is not a hard thing to do. It's just a more effective thing to do. Do you know what I mean? Anybody in here work hard? Have 7 o'clock at night, you have free time and you got nothing to do and you start doing reruns of Hogan's Heroes and, anybody? Or you like up to here every day, and by 11 o'clock at night, you're still paddling, right? So the things that we will propose for you to do are not going to make you work harder. They're just going to make you a more effective dad. Does everything you do in your day effective? Does it yield an NOI or an ROI, return on investment? Would you like a return on investment of 100%? I would, like on everything I do, right? So what we do is we teach you how the brain functions and develops. We evaluate kids. We teach you how to master the process, because it's not good enough to just be kind of good at raising your kids. It's better to be a master, right? Oh yeah, well, I'll just do this, and No, it's good to be a master. It's good to master stuff, especially your kids, especially understanding their neurology, because then you don't make these big mistakes. How to develop a joyful program to be implemented at home in a home environment. We teach you how to do this because you're better at it with your kid than I am. Because why? Because you love your kid more than I do. I love my kids. You love yours. You know them. And I could teach you, and you could be super effective. Do you ever discipline your child, and you don't really know whether you're doing it well or not? You're like, am I right to discipline him right now? Is that disorganization, or is that disobedience? Is that because he really didn't know what to do, or because he did it on purpose? You ever have that question in your mind? Yeah, doesn't that drive you crazy? Like, was I mean right there, or was I effective? Did I teach him something, or did I punish him? Right? Discipline, the word for discipline is wisdom. Did I impart wisdom just now, or did I punish my kid? What do you want to do? Discipline or punish? If you don't understand the neurology, it could get upside down really easy, right? And you could feel like, your kid doesn't learn through punishment. He learns through discipline. You creating successful neurological boundaries, right? Worked for you when you grew up, or perhaps it didn't, so now you know the difference. So who's your kid? Is my kid a collection of symptoms? Is he a collection of behaviors? Is he a collection of disabilities? Is he a collection of diseases? Symptoms. His eye turns in. He slurs his words. He turns his feet in when he walks. When he's in a noisy environment, he puts his hands over his ears. He sometimes hums to himself and moves back and forth. He hits his brother for no apparent reason. He's got all these symptoms. He's hyperactive. He's got seizures occasionally. His eye turns in. He's got auditory processing disorder. He's got all these symptoms. Is my kid just a collection of symptoms that I just go, boom, I bullet point? I go to this guy for this, and this guy for this, and this woman for this, and I'm driving around and get medicated for this. He's got the glasses for strabismus. He's got the hearing aids for this. He's got the medication for seizures. He's got the ADD medication for this. Is my kid a collection of behaviors? He's disobedient. He steals all the time. He lies all the time. He hits his brother. He cries constantly. He overreacts to a little bit of discipline. He just goes off on a rail. It takes me an hour to bring this guy back into the universe. Or he has no compassion and empathy. He never tells me he loves me. He never looks me in the eye. He won't hug me. He has no communication skills with his brothers and sisters. He goes by himself all the time. Is my kid a collection of disabilities? He's got cerebral palsy. He's got Down syndrome. He's got ADD, ADHD. He's got a disability. Is that really true? Ooh, wait a minute. Is he a collection of diseases? He's got means by definition he's got a headache. He's got cancer. He's got epilepsy. Is epilepsy a disease? No. Is cerebral palsy a disease? No. It's a neurological complication in the basal ganglia, rooted through the thalamus. He got hurt, either car accident or by birth. It's not a disease. Is my kid a collection of syndromes, which is a collection of symptoms that nobody knows? He's got Down syndrome. He's got Angelman syndrome. He's got White syndrome. Is my kid a collection of guesses? You ever been to a neurologist or a psychologist and you say, please help me with this kid, I don't understand him. And you walk out and you think that person simply guessed. Anybody ever think somebody guessed about your kid? And you paid him, what, $450 an hour for that guess? You wouldn't pay your auto mechanic for that. Oh, I think it's a transmission. Meanwhile, you pull out and your car stops 50 feet down the road and it wasn't your transmission after all. He just guessed. But psychologists and neurologists get to guess about your kid, and there's no accountability sometimes. Oh, he's got ADD, ADHD, and PDD, and otherwise unspecified. Here, take this. More than 41 million prescriptions of ADD medication was given out last year in the United States for people over 17 years old. So it's our adult population is heavily medicated. 1 in 7 kids in the United States is now medicated through first grade. What's going on? Are we upside down here? We would say none of the above. We would say none. And we're not being simplistic. We're just being scientists. This is cheap science. ADD, that's cheap science. Can we please say he's got a brain injury in his brainstem, he's disorganized in his brainstem, rather than calling him ADD, ADHD. Scientists are not scientists these days when it comes to the brain. Oh yeah, they understand serotonin and melatonin and dopamine and neurons do this and et cetera, et cetera. But when it comes to understanding the functionality, when it comes to a hurt brain, they're going to give you a label that is very unscientific and then give you a medication to mask the symptoms. Every day they have a medication, you're another 2 days from solving the problem. So part of the reasons why you're in this room is because you have about 80% hope. Hope that maybe I have an answer that you need for your kid because you care, because you don't sleep. 20% you have fear. If I don't solve this issue right now, I cannot see my kid at 21 years old like this. This is not possible. When I was working with my kids, there was 80% hope because I understood the pathway, but there was still hope. Like, you know what? I want my kid to be well. Why? Because I love wellness of my kid. I don't know. I love him. That's what I want him to be better than me, right? But there was that 20%. But if I don't do something effective every day, then my kid's not going to make it. He's not going to be in school. My daughter, Mary, the third one, could not be in a classroom. Under any circumstances, couldn't survive in a classroom. She was homeschooled, so she was in 9th grade. Couldn't make it. Blew up the classroom. Blew up the teacher. Couldn't do it. It took us till her, she was in 9th grade to totally organize her, and then we put her in a school and she blossomed. But if I had put her in 2 years earlier, boom. So there was that fear, right? This kid's got to make it. It's okay. It's okay to have hope. It's okay to have a little fear too, because that makes you a little intense. Intense for your kid, not intense at your kid. Intense for them. So what we do is we have a developmental chart. This is our chart. This is what we developed. This is scientifically validated. It's going to be published in the Pediatric Physical Therapy Journal. It has a rate of reliability of 98%. It also has a rate of validity of 0.001 in terms of the program results. So if I stick a hole in this and I stuck my face through it, that would be me. And I could measure you, sir, on this chart, which would take me about 3 hours. I could measure your entire neurology. And I could tell you all the good things that are going on, and I could tell you all the things that you need a little help with that you've been coping with your whole life. Maybe you wanted to be a doctor, but you couldn't because you couldn't read 400 words a minute and couldn't memorize as well as you could, but you had the propensity to be one. Maybe you wanted to be a really good baseball player because you loved baseball, but you couldn't hit a curveball because your laterality was off and you didn't have perfect depth perception. We could have healed that for you. Maybe you would have been a better baseball player, maybe not a major league one, but you would have been able to do that. So there's a whole lot of kids that want to be a whole lot of things, but the neurology upsets their cortical ability and their potential up here because the brainstem's not happy. What we do is we open up the brain and we step inside the brain and we look up and down that brain and we say, okay, what lights are on and what lights aren't? They all should be burning at 100 watts, 70, 80, two functions. That one's over there is not burning at all. I got to go replace that one. This one I got to upgrade. Whoa, there's a whole lot down here by the brainstem. Let me sort these guys out down here, because if I don't sort the bottom out, how can I get the top happy? So we teach you how to do this because it's important because you care. And if you don't solve the brainstem, then the cortex can't happen. But nobody really, has anybody, you walked into a psychologist, neurologist, and said, tell me about the medulla oblongata of my kid. Could you please tell me about the Pons? How's my kid's Pons functioning? I could tell you. In fact, if you came to a 3-day seminar, you would know more. I had a neurologist at our last seminar. She was in the room because she had a Downs kid, and now it got personal. She was an expert in medicating for migraines, And she had a migraine that week, and I did a treatment on her, and she didn't have a migraine. She hasn't had one since. It took me 45 minutes. She's upside down now because her whole practice was dealing with migraines and medicating migraines. But I told her a simple technique that she could do, and it alleviated the entire migraine situation for her. She hasn't had one in 4 months. She's on our program, by the way. She stood up at the end of the 3 days, and she said, this was the most important thing I've ever learned in terms of the brain. I learned more about the brain in 3 years than I learned in 16 years of practice. What does that say? Does that make me a genius? No. That just makes me knowledgeable about this subject. But she, good news, she was in the room. She was in the room for her kid. She was not going to be in the room for herself. But because it was her kid, she said, you know what? I just figured out the brain. You just put it together for me, because she was micromanaging and she couldn't see the big picture. But now her kid is doing great. So we evaluate abilities and function. We do not evaluate the disabilities of a kid because it doesn't get us anywhere. Not because we want to be Mr. Chuckles. It's because if you had a kid that came in this room, right, and your kid couldn't walk. Let's say you had a 10-year-old kid who couldn't walk. Right? There's probably a lot of people in this room, the kids that got the diagnosis of dyslexia, learning problems, but I'm just going to give you an example. If a kid that can't walk, and they've been in PT and OT their whole life trying to get this kid to walk, if you evaluated he couldn't walk, then your entire neurological program would be getting the kid to walk, right? But let's say you evaluate his ability. He could crawl on his belly, but he couldn't creep on his hands and knees like an 8-month-old, and he couldn't walk, but he's 10. If you evaluated the abilities that he could at least crawl, and you understood that the ontogenetic process, how you got to be you, was that you were born in an aqueous solution in your mother's uterus and you were moving by the time you were 5 months old that she could feel. You came out, you crawled on your belly, then you crept on your hands, and then you stood up and walked. Then if you evaluated that the kid's ability was to crawl, then you would start there. And if you knew that one thing recapitulates the next thing, you would look at crawling and say, I'm going to reinforce this to bring about this. I'm going to spend 80% of my time crawling on the belly because I want to reinforce the pons and in particular formation to bring about the next level, and I'm going to give 20% to the next level to give opportunity. When they started to creep, 80% of my time creeping and 15% of my time teaching this kid how to use his feet. Then when he stands up to walk, he's got stability. He doesn't need a walker. He doesn't need braces. He doesn't need AFO. Because I've neurologically developed his brain from the ground up. So we need to evaluate abilities, not disabilities, because disabilities leads to pathological therapeutic protocols like medications. And more reading programs and more math programs. And, oh, this one's probably going to work. Oh, God, please. It doesn't, right? You've done that. So then we evaluate according to normal function because we don't want to evaluate pathology. We want to evaluate physiology. We want to evaluate wellness. This is the chart of wellness. This is everybody in this room has this brain. We would just measure your medulla, your pons, your midbrain, your cortex. We'd find out what areas are happy, what areas need some help. We'd circle that. We'd then give you a neurological age and evaluate against your chronological age to come up with your degree of ability, and then we would design an engineering protocol to solve and support the areas that were not happy to bring them up to functionality. And once they came up to functionality, the symptoms would disappear. The eye, instead of it turning in, would come out straight, as opposed to wearing glasses. The medication, because you couldn't sit still, would not need to be needed because now you can focus. Okay? We think God did it. We just happen to write it down. Okay? We're standing on the shoulders of giants. The people that started this whole process of measuring neurological development started way, way, way back in the 30s with Gazelle and Temple Fay and Kerr, Greenspan, Doman. These people developed the central protocols. We built on that next protocol. This, as I said, this chart's been validated. It's being published. Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. This is not about being complicated. A lot of things in life that are simple are really, really, really effective, like water, as opposed to juice. You know, vegetables as opposed to sugar, yeah? I mean, some things, sometimes going out and playing in the sun and having a good meal is better than anything, right? Sometimes the basics are the best, but sometimes we get off track. We want to peel away the dysfunctional symptoms to get to the source of the neurological organization and then treat it. But we want you to help us. We want to do it together. Okay, so let's look at the medulla oblongata. Let's just give you a sample of that, okay, of the medulla. This is a beautiful part of your brain. Nobody talks about it, by the way, but it's the first part of your brain that God gave you to stand up on your own 2 feet. It's your brainstem, okay? So your medulla oblongata is right here. This is your medulla oblongata, and another picture of it is here. And it runs down your spine, medulla spinalis, into your sacrum. Your sacrum is a bone that moves back and forth like this, like in this motion. And this motion here causes a vibration up your spine, and your brain expands while your tailbone does this. And when your brain contracts, your tailbone goes this, so you have a craniosacral cycle. The craniosacral cycle allows you to pour 40% of your cerebral spinal fluid into your connective tissue so that you can have maximum flexibility. If you have a brain injury, the cerebral spinal fluid, which is made in the ventricles of your brain, which carries the chemical message and the electromagnetic message to the rest of your body, shuts down, and you don't get the fluid going down your spine, and you become rigid. You become spastic. And the gel-like substance that floats around in your connective tissue becomes collagen, and you are really, really tight. And you can barely breathe, and they got to give you a tube. And then they start cutting you. And then they give you baclofen. And they give you muscle relaxants. And if you don't solve the craniosacral mechanism and you don't rehydrate the connective tissue, we can't get to the brain. So it's all working together. This part of the brain is responsible for all of your reflexes. You have more than 30 reflexes. Okay? So what we do is we evaluate all these reflexes. If I shine a light in your eyes, what would your pupils do? They contract, right? If I paid you $1 million not to have your pupils contract, and I say, okay, ready? I'll give you $1 million. Don't let your pupils constrict. Ready? Yeah, you'd have to close your eyes. You'd have to shut down the pathway. But if your eyes were open and I did this, what would happen is your pupils contract. You cannot stop your reflexes, thank God. Because when I go outside in the California sun, it's so bright. What do my eyes do? They contract. I take the light away, they dilate. So these are all reflexes. And by the way, you need about 7 to 8 reflexes to be born. Mother's got fluid in her uterus, right? Kid's floating around, he's moving, you feel it, ooh, 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 right? One day, if the kid's not moving for 2 days in your uterus and he's 8 months, what are you thinking? Something's wrong with my baby. He's not moving. Oh my gosh. And so what do you call a doctor? He says, my baby's not moving. So what happens? Water breaks, you start contracting, right? The water has to break. When you contract, what happens? What does the baby do? The baby uses the Perez reflex, the Gallant, the Babinski, head riding, hands pulling, hand supporting. The baby uses the asymmetrical tonic-leg reflex and uses these 7 to 8 reflexes to be born. If the baby doesn't have the reflexes, it takes 17, 18, 19 hours. We got a hurt kid. Uh-oh. Let's pay attention. Let's not pretend. So the reflexes, if I fall over, what's going to happen? My hand's going to support me. It's called hand supporting reflex. If I went like this, what happens? My foot comes out. That's called the stepping reflex. If I don't put my foot out, somebody pays me $1 million. Matt, don't put your foot out. Ready? I have to. Otherwise, I smash my face on the floor. I can't do that. I don't have the ability to hurt myself when I'm cortically tuned in. But there's a lot of kids have this issue. A lot of kids have these issues. The moral fear paralysis response, you do this to somebody, they blink. If you do it again, they still blink, then they have a moral fear paralysis response. That's called post-traumatic stress disorder. If you scream at this kid, 3 things are going to happen. He's either going to punch you in the face, he's either going to run, or he's going to freeze. It's called the polyvagal. Lots of our kids who have ADD, ADHD have a moral fear paralysis reflex that never got developed. And so when you give them a hard time, or the coach in football gives them a hard time, they collapse under pressure. So when we look at these reflexes, this is the Babinski reflex. I stroke the bottom of the foot and the big toe fans out. So this big toe fans out. This is going to help me crawl on my belly. Right? If you were going to crawl on your belly, wouldn't you use your big toe? But when you stood up, what happens when I stand up, my big toe goes down. That's called the plantar reflex. It helps me not fall over. What happens if I was leaning forward and my big toes went up? What happens? I fall over, right? That's called a reflex problem, not a balance problem. 85 to 90% of the kids don't have a functional Babinski reflex who have ADD, ADHD symptomology because they're hurt in the brain stem. But if you don't see that and you can't correct that, then their whole life they have balance issues and they're awkward and they're running and they're awkward and they're playing. Okay? This is the tonic neck reflex, head turned to the flexed upper limb. This is the beginning of ontogenetic development. This is how you feed yourself. It's how you read and write in arithmetic. But if you put your kid on your back, they do this. You're not supposed to be on your back. You're supposed to be on your stomach. You put a kid in your back, you put stomach, this happens. You need that reflex to read and write and do arithmetic. Everybody put your hands up in the air and make a fist for me, okay? Make a fist. Okay? Sir, can you come up for me? You come up and... Can you come up for me? Keep them up. Everybody make a fist, please, please, please. Make a fist. Da, 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 da. Keep going. Da, 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 da. Okay. Right? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to look at your hands. Look at your hands. You guys make a fist for me. If I was evaluating the manner and development of my baby, this would be dysfunctional. All right? This is not a perfect grasp reflex. But he's a nice guy. He supports his wife. He loves his kids. He's got a good job, and God bless him. This is a perfect grasp reflex. Everybody look around. Now look around the room. You guys, let's look around the room. You measure all the... See that neurology over there? That's not good. That's great. That's okay. That's a little bizarre over there. All right? Her neurology over there. See that? That thumb's over here? That's not a perfect grasp reflex. If she fell through a tree, she would lose about 40% of her... She could not grasp, so she would hurt herself. Okay? Thanks. But you're all nice people. But, if you've got a kid who doesn't have a perfect grasp reflex, do not expect him to tie his shoes very well. Do not expect his handwriting to be perfect. All right? This is what a baby does. Now, if you could look at your kid's brain and you could go down all those reflexes, you wouldn't make his neurology his problem. You would say, oh, you know what? I need to help you out here. I need to develop your grasp reflex. And you're a nice guy, but let's say you really wanted to have a stronger grip to be a carpenter. Let's say you wanted to hammer 1,000 nails a day. And when you grabbed that hammer, you did this. But by 300, your arm was killing you. Because you didn't have this grasp, because this will give you 40% more strength. And you could really hammer that. You could really develop your handwriting. You really could tie your shoes. You could really dress yourself much faster if you had this, but you had to start with this. But instead of teaching this to kids all day long and teach them how to write, I perfect this, and then I go straight through the bill. Let's say I didn't have a perfect light reflex, but I could teach that to you. I could grow your brain. You had a perfect light reflex, you could read better. But I got to know where I'm looking at. I got to know where to go. So when we look at kids, we measure the medulla oblongata. Here's the limbic part of the brain. The limbic part of the brain is here, by the way. It's here. This is the limbic part of the brain. This is your sense of smell. Roots to the amygdala. The hippocampus for short-term memory. Comes through the geniculate gyrus. The septal region is in here. This is the part for pleasure. This is the part for orgasm. This is the part for, like, I really enjoyed that game you played with me. I really enjoyed playing baseball. Okay? Video games distort the septal regions of the brain. Spectacularly distort the septal regions of the brain. So the kids have these micro pleasures, and their brain becomes wired that they have to have these fast, pleasurable experiences, and they can't play baseball, they can't play soccer, they don't want to play Monopoly, Parcheesi, sorry. They don't want to play these games because their brain is getting fixated on the limbic part, the septal regions of the brain. So a lot of our kids are addicted to Video games. So we need to take it away because it's rewiring their brain forever if we don't resort it out. This part of the brain is responsible for all your emotions: empathy, sadness, kindness, playing with others, eye contact, smiling through a smile, telling you I love you, snuggling with you. Somebody falls down in the playground and you go and you help them up. You don't laugh at them or walk around them. You want to be part of the group. You're hurt in this part of the brain. You don't care about being part of the group. You really don't help out your family. You don't spontaneously help. You don't smile to a smile. You don't make eye contact. You struggle to say I love you. You struggle to bond. You struggle to fit in. You can't make friends. But when you sort this part of the brain out through the sense of smell, we have kids who are 12 years old, never had a friend. Ever had a friend. Mother says, look, I don't care if he ever reads. But I got to get this kid friends. I'm dying here. Grow the sense of smell, 5 smells, 5 times a day. Change them out every 5 days. Get the kid really, really understanding it. Do some cranial work, open up the brain so it breathes. Boom. This kid begins to care that friends are important and begins to have empathy, compassion, eye contact, smiling through a smile, which is the hallmark of kids hurt on the autism spectrum disorder. They don't have a brain to be social. And these kids can't smell. Or they oversmell. They smell so much that they won't eat anything that you feed them. They'll only eat Cocoa Krispies, macaroni and cheese, white bread with peanut butter, hot dogs, chicken with nothing on it. But they get themselves into a carbohydrate-strong diet. And every molecule of gluten that they eat that's not digested, scientists say, turns into at least 10 opiates. 10 opiates. You know what an opiate is? It's like doing a mushroom. These kids go off with the fairies. And they can't focus. So they eat gluten and gluten and gluten because they're so sensorily overloaded that eating gluten helps to ratchet down the sensory data, but they can't learn as well. They're walking on their toes. They're spinning. They're doing stuff like this because they need to just pull down the sensory data because they're way over the top. But to solve that, you got to go through their brainstem and you got to go through their limbic area of the brain. Okay? Does that make sense? Anybody have a kid who only wants to eat carbohydrates? How's that working for you? If you serve them anything else, you're the devil. You're the devil. I hate you. My kid used to tell me she hated me every day. I said, God bless you. I don't care. I don't care if you. Now she tells me she loves me, but there was a long time she told me she hated me every day. I didn't care. I knew that was all distortion. It wasn't her. It was it. You got to get off this track. Got to get off the track. If you don't change, your kid can't change. And the school system's not going to change for you. You got to change yourself. But if you see the issue, you'll be able to solve the problem. If you don't see it clear, then how can you take really strategic steps and go down that pathway and make it happen? So what we do is we measure that. We give this kid a neurological age for his medulla. And then we march up the pathway. This is the Pons. The Pons is right here. I'll go a few more, and then I'll answer some questions and give you how we do this. This is the Pons. The Pons is the second most important part of the brain. Okay? And you can see that the reticular formation runs right through the little bit of the medulla, most of the way through the Pons, and peaks out into the midbrain. Okay? So the reticular formation is particularly important because it helps you focus. It helps you to pay attention, helps you discriminate and push away irrelevant data. Do you ever look for a car? Like, let's say you were going to buy a Toyota Camry, okay? You're looking, you're going to the stores, you're looking. And as you start looking for Toyota Camrys, and you're driving to work one day in your Nissan Sentra, don't you start seeing Toyota Camrys all over the road? Like, oh, what happened? That's your reticular formation. It's helping to pull things out so that you can make a better decision. It helps you see the future for yourself. It also helps you focus in a classroom and everybody's making noise and you can pay attention to the teacher. It helps you sit at the kitchen table and do your homework while Billy's over there having a fight with Sally. And you cannot solve this part of the brain unless you crawl on your belly, because crawling on your belly grows the reticular formation. It allows you to hold your urine so you don't pee your bed when you're 10, helps you with your bowels, helps you with your heart rate, your digestion, your focus, your tongue, how this works, and your mumbling or anything about this tongue runs through the reticular formation, runs through the pons, which governs the facial and cranial nerves, which help you. So the pons, crawling on your belly, governs about 35 different functions, and nobody really does it these days. We carry our kids, we put them in Johnny Walkers, we put them in jump-ups, we let them roll on their back. They stay on their back so much their head goes flat. They get adopted out of Russia, and they were never on the floor. You show me a floor, and I'll show you a civilization. The floor is the most expensive piece of equipment that you need to heal your kid's brain. You put them down on the floor, you recapitulate ontogeny. You get that kid to crawl for 100 days, and you're going to see a change. How much depends on his age, and how much depends on his size? Yes?
Does that mean that kids that never crawl, there's automatic issues?
Kids that never crawl is automatic issue. Yes, because they don't have anything in their hard drive. You organize parts of your brain through the mobility pathway, right? You got your sensory ones, and you have your motor ones called walking in a cross pattern. Imagine if you never ran. Would you have the ability to adapt your breathing to the next level and whistle? Probably not. So God designed your pons to house certain neurological abilities that you cannot recapitulate or develop unless you do that. You got to get in that door, and you got to spend time. That's why babies crawl on their belly. If you left babies alone, they would crawl on their belly, then they'd creep on their hands and knees, and they'd stand up and walk. But what we do is we do this. Watch, we do this. And we do this. A lot. A lot. You go to a baby shower, you're going to get a bunch of this stuff. Right? You will not get kids, but this is crawling on your belly. This is your facial nerves. You ever see a 2-month-old just smiling in their sleep? They're not dreaming about their next meal, by the way. They're just going, They need this in order to communicate. Your face is where you communicate more than your sense of words, right? Would you believe somebody's words or their face? You believe their face. Amen. This is the lateral rectus muscle right here. This helps you to slide your eyes side to side like this. You need your eyes to go side to side to do what? Read. How many of you teach your kid to do read? Come on, stay with my finger. Come on, come on. And you have a ruler. Maybe you have a thingy where it's just one sentence, so their eyes don't go all over the place. Well, you're doing eye exercises. Come on, you can do it. Oh, 3 days, 3 weeks. Oh. Put them on their belly, crawling for 100 days. They organize the lateral rectus muscles, and bingo, their ability, because look at the brain. Here's the pons. The lateral rectus muscles, right, comes right out. Here's the pons right here. The abducen nerve balances that muscle. You can only get to that muscle by crawling. If you have a strabismus and your eye's going out here, what does the doctor do? He cuts it. And he wants your eye to be straight because he thinks that structure determines function. If I cut the eye and make it straight, I'll make his eyes straight and they'll be able to track. No, because the nerve ending goes to that. It's still run by the brain, and it's going to go out there anyway. It's just not going to look like it's going out there. You following me? That makes sense? Structure does not determine function. Function determines structure. The more I crawl, the better my pons. The more I do push-ups, the bigger my arms, if that's necessary for me. If I want to do that for wrestling or rugby or something like that, if you stimulate the brain, it will grow. But few of us go back to the future. Few of us go back to the areas of the brain because we didn't know this. Did you guys know any of this? I just said this. You're like, oh my gosh, I think that's important. My kid never crawled. Oh, he rolled for transportation. He was on his back. Oh, no wonder he still urinates his bed. He's 5 years old. I can't toilet train him. Oh, because the part of the brain that helps him to do that is in the pons, not in his cortex. I don't want to wet my bed. I don't want to wet my bed. He goes to sleep. I wet my bed. Oh my God, I did it again. He feels terrible because you're working on the wrong part of his brain. Okay? So what we do then is we measure the pons. It takes us some time. We teach you so that you can be informed with your discretion by education so you could be a more effective parent. You're already a great parent. You're the greatest mom in the whole wide world for your kid. But are you the most effective person available for your kid? Maybe, maybe not. You love them, but you don't have the information to make the right decisions in a strategic manner to help your kid get to a yes before he gets to be 21. Or whatever, right? It'd be good to get the yes tomorrow, but that's not going to happen. You got to lay out a neurology pathway. You got to stick to it, but you got to know why, where, when, and how. What for? Why would I do crawling on my belly? Now you're thinking, crawling's the best thing in the world. If I crawl, 16 symptoms will disappear. His convergence, his laterality, his tongue will work better, his bowels will work better, he'll focus better, his neck will be better, his hips will link to his shoulders. He won't look like he's Mr. Gumbo. Yeah, the kids are just look like their legs going over there and their arms going over there because they didn't do the gallant reflex, which is stimulated through this reflex of crawling. Therefore, their spine is weak, their posture's poor. Keep your head up. Come on, keep your shoulders back. Keep your head up. Keep your head up. You crawl for 100 days, right? Pfft, he's got a nice posture. Why? Because his brain works. God, thank you. Thank you for that information, because now I cannot make it his problem. I can make it the issue, and I can solve that. So we have the midbrain, which is here. This is the whole basal ganglia and thalamus. The thalamus is considered in Chinese medicine the heart of the brain. So the ability, for instance, to hear and recognize voice inflection. That's a nice haircut. What do you think? Oh, he likes my haircut. That's a nice haircut you have there. What are you thinking? I don't really like that haircut. Or I say, that's the worst haircut I ever saw. You know I'm teasing you. That I like you, that I get to tease you. Guys do that all the time. We tease each other. The more we tease each other, the more we like each other. I don't know why we do it. It's part of the genetic code. But you will believe the tone of voice before you believe a word, right? So if I texted you, I love you. Oh, he loves me. If you say to me one time, we're out on a date or whatever, and you say, I love you, and I go, love you too. Love you. What are you thinking? I love you, and I go, love you. What are you thinking? Ooh. Ooh, if my wife comes in and she says, how do you like my haircut? It's awesome. I really, really like it. I'm in trouble, right? I'm in trouble, right? Would you agree I'm in trouble? I'm in deep, stop digging, I'm in deep water. If I texted that, she'd be like, he likes my haircut, he likes my haircut, I'm the best, right? So your midbrain tells you what to hear through the sounds, and this is where kids get upside down in the playground. They misinterpret the inflection. Or you say to him in church, they're lined up in church, you say, Billy, if you hit your brother one more time again, I'm going to rip your face off. And you're hoping that he gets your inflection. Anybody ever say that? I mean, I've said that to my kids. I'm sorry I did that, but But if my kid's going, well, if he doesn't understand my inflection in my voice, he's going to keep doing it, and I'm going to think he's disobedient, but the truth is he didn't hear it. So this is the part of the brain that regulates and filters sound, locates, quickly hears, allows me to feel all the nice stroking and tickling, creeping on my hands and knees, making sounds and babbling like a 7-month-old, helps me bring my eyes together and converge on an object. So this is a pretty important part of your brain. That's what creeping is, okay? So at the end, I measure everything. Our team measures everything. We go through the entire cortex, and we measure, and at the end, we give a kid a neurological age for every pathway. This kid has a neurological age of 66.4, but I got to divide it by 7 abilities, so his functionality is 9.48 months. That would be okay if he was a 9-month-old. It'd be spectacular if he was a 6-month-old. But my kid is 26 months old. He's the 2-year-old with a neurological age of 9.48. I'm upside down on this kid. I love this kid, but he's upside down. And I targeted all the areas of his brain. Look, he's got a lot of issues in his midbrain. So therefore, when I go do a diagnosis, I see that he's only functioning at 34% of his ability. So there is a really severe disconnect between where he should be and where he's supposed to be. Where he is now, if you got a 36 in a math test, wouldn't there be a profound disconnect between you and algebra? Yeah, wouldn't be, right? I need to help you. Yeah. So we have to do this scientifically. We measure extent, degree, laterality, okay? and the functionality. We don't label this, then we go and we develop a program. So our approach is to work together with a family to assess the cause, to view the kid as a whole person, not a visual problem and not an auditory problem, not a tactile problem. Let's look at the whole kid here, okay? He's not a handicapped kid, he's a well kid who temporarily is off his moorings. Why? Doesn't matter. What caused it? Birth, vaccination, car accident. Okay, we're here. Let's do this. Okay? And we develop a cohesive program. We teach it to you. We help you. We coach you. Right? And then we divide and we give a program that uses a lot of different modalities. Why? Because it's important to heal the brain, not waste time. All these are very critical to plug in at the right time, at the right place. They're really, really important to heal the brain.